Welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast. Today, we are joined by Wesley Farnsworth. Welcome.
Thanks, Matthew. It's good to be with you today.
Yeah, I brought you on the show because you have this fantastic story on how you found Jesus. But not only that, though, you are a seasoned leader with over 15 years of practice with being able to help people to change their lives, whether when it comes to communication, leadership, and just being there for people. Andrew wrote a book recently called The Blueprint of Becoming. But before we get into all, I want to start with your background of your life before you found Christ. How were you? What was it like? Take us back to your life prior to finding Jesus.
Yeah, so I don't really remember life before Christ, before Jesus, because I've grew up in a pastor's household as a pastor's kid. And so I was taught from a very early age to follow him. Now, it wasn't until I was probably around 5 or 6 that I remember giving my life to Christ. And then it was about 9 or 10 when I was finally baptized in water and made that outward declaration. So I've always had a faith in some way, shape, or form. How I lived that faith out, that is another story. That has gone through its seasons of ups and downs, if you will.
Because I imagine as a small kid, I mean, you were in it, but you didn't really know what you wanted at that point because you were like 8 or 9 years old. So how could you know what it means to like be all in for Jesus, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of that came from just living in the household that I lived in. Seeing it lived day in, day out. I knew that's what I wanted, and I made that decision. I did make it again kind of later in life in my teen years, when I was in a part of my youth group and stuff. And I had a little bit more of a, understanding, if you will. I did rededicate my life at that point in time. But yeah, I knew from kind of an early age that that's what I wanted. Just because of like I said, the environment that I was in. But you're right. When you're young and you accept Christ, you may have that relationship and you may have made that decision. But part of growing up in faith is for a little while, you kind of ride your parents' coattails, right? You learn from them and you mimic them. And so for a while, while I had a relationship, it wasn't necessarily mine. It was my parents, and I was kind of I was along for the ride, so to speak.
Is there some pressure there? Because like pastor's kid, so you think you have to be like perfect all the time because you're at the church or there?
Yeah, sometimes there is pressure. It's not always vocalized pressure, right?
Right, I imagine.
It's one of those unspoken pressures that I think pastors' kids feel, and I can say that because I've talked to a lot of pastors' kids over the years. And there's this feeling. It's much like pastors. I think pastors are kind of put on a pedestal, and they're expected to act in a certain way and be holier than thou and above approach and all this stuff. In other words, they're not supposed to be human.
Basically,
and by extension, pastors' kids are supposed to be the same way. How dare they misbehave? They're the pastor's kid. Well, you know what? They're kids. They're gonna be misbehave. They're gonna get themselves into trouble. It's a part of being a kid. Just because their dad is a pastor or their mom is a pastor doesn't make them perfect.
Right.
But there is that pressure to act a certain way, to say certain things, to behave a certain way, to think certain things. And so it's just one of those things that kind of comes with the territory.
Right. Plus, like the whole high school years, you're trying to be cool, popular. It's tough always to deal with being like a follower of Christ, but also trying to be cool, like your peers, I think, in that way. How did you balance those two parts of yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is a time there when your faith meets the secular world and they collide. I was
Right.
actually talking about this morning with somebody. We know on one hand the Bible says we should do this, but then when we're out with our friends or we're out with somebody and they're like, let's go do this, and well, this doesn't match what this says. And so you have this kind of internal battle going on, and nobody's going to get it perfect all the time. I know I sure didn't, or I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today. But it's one of those things that you just have to, knowing now I know how to handle things a little bit different, to take that step back and examine things and figure out if the decision to follow the world view is better than the decision to follow Christ's view, and what he wants for me. Which one's going to give me the better thing? Well, obviously, in my opinion, following God's always going to be the better thing to do. But it may not be the best thing in that moment. You may have to deny yourself. You may have to deny yourself some instant pleasures, some instant satisfaction, some gratification, some instant something, from, maybe getting the candy right now is going to be an instant satisfaction. We're going to heal that sweet tooth that we've got going on when we're at the candy store. But we know long term is probably not going to be the best for us. That's the best way to think about it.
Do you have tips for that? Because we want to be focused in Christ. Those like carnal flesh, we're still human, and so we want things, but we have to try and reconcile that to being with Christ too.
Yeah, the best way to do it is accountability.
That's true.
In community. I'm very active in a recovery program, and one of the things that we talk about in this, and everyone's like, oh, well, I don't have recovery, so this doesn't apply to me. Well, it absolutely applies to you whether you're in a recovery program or not. Excuse me. Because community and accountability is what is scriptural. Two is stronger than one. The Bible says that. And so if you're out there and you're like, man, I really need to get over the sweet tooth. I really need to stop eating cheeseburgers. I really need to stop drinking alcohol. I really need to stop, insert this, picking my nose, whatever it is. Then one of the easiest ways to do this is accountability. And having that person that you can call and you can be butt naked honest with and be like, hey, here's my life, here's all my drama, here's everything. I mean, my podcast is called Unmasked, because that's exactly what I preach. Hey, we need to have somebody that we can be unmasked with, that we can say, hey, here's what I'm going through, so that when I have that desire to eat that candy, when I have the desire to eat that candy or take that drink or eat that cheeseburger or pick my nose or whatever it is, I have somebody that I can call and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling right now. Can we just talk? Can you help talk me through this so that I don't do this anymore? Because I'm really tired of doing it.
Right. Well, that all sounds good on paper, but it's so scary to say, hey, I'm Matthew, I have all these problems.
Yeah.
You're a stranger to this group. For you personally, what made that shift from hiding to going to these groups and putting yourself out there?
Yeah, ultimately that comes down to what a lot of people refer to as that rock bottom moment.
Right.
That moment when you realize, hey, I can't do this by myself anymore. For me, I battled an addiction for 20 years, and it finally got to the point where I had to say, you know what? I have tried to fix this and stop doing this for so long, and while I've had limited success, I've never had lasting success, and that's because I was trying to do everything myself. I was trying to not only fulfill my role in getting clean, but I was trying to fulfill God's role, and I was keeping everything bottled up and inside of me. And it wasn't until I finally realized that I can't do this anymore, something has to change, that I found myself in a meeting for my very first time, and I found myself blurting and talking about the secret that, I'd been holding on to for so long. And it wasn't until that moment that the chains were broken and I was able to begin walking in freedom, because I stopped trying to do it by myself.
So Walk us through that. So you have like your first meeting, right? It takes probably
Yeah.
some time for that process to really like happen for you.
What do you
Well,
mean?
meaning because like your first meeting, right? It's probably be a
Yeah.
little bit awkward. These are all strangers. It probably took like a few months of like steady like progress and like accountability calls. For you, how long did that take to like really feel like it was like a new you, like happening here?
For me, I'm one of those. I'm gonna say I'm one of those rare instances. Um, you know, for me it was pretty instantaneous
Really?
when it comes to my addiction. I battled pornography for 20 years, and it got to the point where that first meeting, when I admitted to somebody the reason I was there, and I finally kind of just put it all in the hands of God and said, "Hey, like I'm tired of running. I'm tired of fighting." That night, like every desire to go back and look at that stuff was gone. Like I just,
Wow,
he
that's
just
a
took it from
miracle.
me. It is, and it's all glory to God. But
Right.
it's not like that for everybody. Everybody's journey is unique, and that's, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Wow, I need to check out that meeting." Everybody's journey is unique. Everybody's story is different. But as long as you're willing to put in the work, there is hope. And that doesn't matter what it is. You could be battling an addiction, to drugs or alcohol. You could be battling overeating. You could be battling low self-worth, low self-esteem, picking your nose. You hate the color blue.
Right.
You lost your dog. It doesn't matter what it is. There's something in your life that you're struggling with, a hurt, a habit, a hang-up that you want to get rid of. And there's hope out there. There is a way
Right.
through it. You just have to be willing to put in the work.
Is it tempting for you to think, I'm healed, I'm good to go, but you have to show up each day, day by day? But I'm sure you have like your moment you think, I've got this, right? It's like in the bag now for this problem.
Yeah. No, never. Because the one thing I have learned, the program I'm a part of is called Celebrate Recovery. It's a Christ-centered recovery group. And the one thing I have learned in my journey through recovery is that you're never done in recovery. The moment that you feel like you are healed, the moment that you feel like you are good to go, is the moment that you will most likely relapse. It only takes a single moment, a single bad decision to start back at ground zero.
Yeah.
And so I will always be a part of the program, not because I necessarily feel like I need it. Right now, I do feel like I have a pretty good grasp on it, and I continue to work it every day. And I will continue to be part of the program to make sure I stay this way for the rest of my life, but also because now that I have been through things, I now am in a position where I can help others by encouraging them and walking alongside them as they work to begin to find freedom from their things.
How does that all work? So people like call you to like check in kind of thing for this program?
It kind of varies. Every relationship is a little bit different. There's a meeting every single week that you attend, and you kind of work through things there. And then eventually you do find yourself a sponsor and accountability team that you check in with regularly. And you just kind of start to do life with them. But that's, again, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, community.
Yes.
Having that community in your life that can speak truth and life into you is so essential.
If you had like a few tips for sponsors, if they have their own like sponsees, like what they should do to make sure it's like a good working like a connection here for the two of them.
Yeah, the best way to do it is to number one, make sure you're approachable.
Yes.
And that your phone is on. If your sponsee can't get a hold of you, then you're not any good to them.
2 a.m., 3 a.m. calls. I'm sure it's always 24/7.
So make sure your phone is on. Make sure you're approachable, and make sure that you yourself are working the program, so that you're staying current and relevant, and you're able to provide the best support that's
Exactly.
needed in the moment.
This may be kind of like a tough question, but it was 20 years, right? I'm sure you probably thought, why didn't it take, 10 years or 12 years? Do you ever think about like that lost time and how it's like impacted you currently and like your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's impacted me in a lot of ways. In some ways, I'm still, still kind of digging out. It was a long time, but today I really feel like the journey that I had to go on to get to where I am today is what has given me the platform that I'm able to speak on today.
Right.
Because we wouldn't be having this conversation if it took me 5 years. I wouldn't have written my book if it had taken me 5 or 6 years, most likely. But it was the fact that it was a 20-year battle, and the fact that I had to go through so much to find freedom, that it gives me some keen insights and some ability to be able to relate with people in a different way, to be able to share encouragement that, hey, you know what? Yeah, what you went through sucked.
Right.
But there's hope. There is hope on the other side. Don't give up.
Do you think that hope is earned, or is like have hope from like day one? Because hope is like this like elusive, like abstract thing sometimes for most people.
Hope is definitely an abstract thought for a lot of people, especially when you're in the thick of it and you're at the point where, I've been trying this for so long and it's not working. Maybe you've been trying to find freedom from something and you're 7 or 10 days in, or even a month in, and then you find yourself back at ground zero.
Right.
It's really easy to lose hope in that moment. But the best thing that you can do is, hey, you know what? You have to be able to be willing to say to yourself, you know what? Yeah, what I went through sucked. Yeah, I'm back at ground zero. Let me take a moment here and reflect back on what I just went through. What can I learn from what I just went through?
Yes.
And how can I apply that to stop myself from going down that road again? Is it the fact that, one of the things I love to use is cheeseburgers when I do use analogies, because everybody loves a good cheeseburger.
Yes.
If you love Five Guys, we'll use Five Guys. You love a good Five Guys burger. Most people do. If you know that that's your weakness, and you gave in because you drove past a Five Guys because you were hungry, well, the next time you're hungry, go or the 3 or 4 extra blocks to go out of the way to go around the Five Guys instead of past the Five Guys, so that you don't pull in next time, right?
Right.
Or if you know that you have to go that route and you have to pass that Five Guys restaurant, then as you're going past it, pick up that phone and call somebody and just say, hey, what's going on? Check in with them. Doesn't mean you have to tell them why you're calling. Just call and make a conversation and distract yourself so that you can get by there without pulling in.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you believe it kind of comes down to God, people, and then like kind of like your willpower to like not go down that block or meet those people. What else helped you in trying to like change like your life here? Because I'm sure it takes a lot of different steps and programs to really change things.
Yeah. The faith is going to be your biggest thing.
Yes.
Faith, and then just your willpower and your desire to get better, to find healing, to find restoration for whatever it is that you're going through. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to find success.
Exactly.
And I hear time and time again, well, I'm bringing in so and so because they're dealing with so and so, and they just really need this program. That's great. I'm glad that you're bringing somebody in to get help. But if they don't want to be there, they're there just to check the box, and they're not going to, whatever success that they find, if they find any, is not going to most likely last, because they're not there for the right reasons. Until they're there for the right reasons, and it's something that they want inside of them, they're not going to find success long term.
And that's tough because you can't force like a rock bottom moment. It could take them 10 years from now. You really just don't know. But you mentioned that it was faith for you. Do you have any tips for how do you grow your faith? Like, is it prayer, scriptures, going to church? Like, what was like the main driving force for you personally to grow your faith in Jesus?
Yeah, there's three things specifically that I point out, and I put this together in a downloadable PDF. At the end of the episode, I'll give you a link that the listeners can go and plug in their email address, and I'll email it over to them.
Okay.
But the easiest things to do that I did to begin making changes in my life to ensure and build my faith was first and foremost, I changed the type of music I was listening to. I stopped listening to secular music and I listen now only to Christian music. And the reason I do that is because music has a way of penetrating your soul like nothing else can. And it is one of those things that can cross any kind of cultural divide that you might be in. Everybody loves music in some way, shape, or form. And so I made sure that the music that I was listening to was speaking truth and life into me instead of speaking all the other garbage that secular music is speaking about. And they speak about divorce and killing people and doing all these things. I don't need that coming into me.
Right.
So I listen to Christian music only to make sure that I'm being fed that in that way. The other thing is making sure I'm in my word. In the Word. I try and do my best to read it every day. I am not perfect. I have ADHD and I get distracted very easily, so I'm not in the Word every single day. But I do my best in some way, shape, or form to get Scripture in every single day because that helps me keep me grounded. And then prayer. Prayer is one of my most important areas. And a lot of people out there, I've talked to people and they're like, well, I pray every day at lunchtime, at dinner time, at breakfast time. Great. Those are important times to pray. Thank God for the food that he's put on your table or put before you. That's very important. We're supposed to give thanks. But a true relationship with God goes beyond the meal times. Talk with him throughout your day. Hey, God, this person looked at me really weird, right? And I'm just not feeling very good right now. Like, why am I feeling this way? And just talk to him. Talk to him like you and I are talking. Prayer doesn't have to be this formal thing where you get down on both knees and you cross your hands or clap your hands together and all these things. Like it's just a conversation. He wants to be your best friend. Just talk to him like we're talking, and tell him what you're thinking, what you're experiencing, what your hopes, your desires, all those things. And as you do that, then shut up.
Yes.
Because shut up and listen, because sometimes he wants to talk back. It's a two-way conversation. And eventually you'll begin to be able to hear him in some way, shape, or form. For me, I tend to hear him more during praise and worship music. So as I'm worshiping, that tends to be when I hear from him the most, outside of prayer time.
It's tough. Some people, they say their prayers, they just don't feel anything coming back from God. But you're saying that you feel the most while you're doing like your worship, the music. But if you had to say it to somebody out there that doesn't feel God at all, and they're trying to reach out with like a glass ceiling, there's like nothing there, what would you then tell that person?
I would say check your heart posture first. Are you actually in it, or are you checking a box? Because for a long time I was praying, but I was more checking a box than anything. I was doing this, hey God, it's me. I was basically, hey God, it's me again. Like, will you do this for me? Thanks God. The end. Amen. Instead of like, hey, God, this is what's coming up right now, and I'm kind of worried. Like, and I just take the extra few minutes and just be honest with him. Tell him what you're feeling. Thank him for things that he's done. It's not a endless bank account that you can just keep withdrawing from. You have to deposit in too. Thank him as well as ask for things, and just allow that two-way conversation to take place. And then, like I said, shut up and listen. Every person he speaks a little bit differently. And if you're still struggling, seek out the advice of your pastor. talk to your pastor from church, and I'm sure if you asked him or her, they would be more than happy to help you in that journey.
That's true. Get some help, right? Do whatever you have to do just to find
community.
Yes, exactly. Find the people. I wanted to bring it back to your book. You call it The Blueprint. I'm kind of curious what the blueprint is for you personally and why you wrote this book to start with.
Yeah, the book Blueprint of Becoming is all about making sure that you're walking in the blueprint that God has for your life. You know, it's very easy for us to go through life and say this is what we want, and then all of our decisions are based around what we want and not necessarily what God wants. And so when God originally told me to write this book and I started it out, the first 2 chapters are just my personal testimony. I go into more depth about my upbringing and the things that I went through and the way I saw God work in my life. And then I talk about my time in the military, and I talk about my addiction and my journey into recovery and where I am today and all these types of things. So I basically spill my guts in the first 2 chapters. And the rest of the book is talking about, hey, you know what? The things that you've been through, they don't define who you are. God has a calling for your life. He has something that he put you on this earth to do. You're not here by mistake. The problem is we get in our own way. You know, in the book, I use this analogy of steering a ship. You know, in nautical times, if the ships are out on the water and their instruments fail, they use stars to navigate their life. And so I use stars in the book as an analogy, and to ensure that we're navigating the waters the right way and we're steering our ship or our life in the direction that we're supposed to go, God needs to be our North Star. He is the one constant. The North Star never moves. And as long as we're pointing our ship towards the North Star and we have that constant in our life, and we're basing all of our conversations, all of our decisions off of what's going to keep us aligned with that North Star, then the rest of life kind of starts to fit in and work itself out a little bit. The problem is when we try to take over and we move our job, our relationships, our interests, whatever it is, our sports, and we allow those things to kind of take over the North Star, that our life, our ship begins to veer off course and things start going wrong. And then we're like, well, what's going wrong? I'm still going to church. I'm still doing, God, what's wrong? Why is all this happening? Well, it's because he may be still in the constellation, the north, the sky.
Right.
He's still there, but he's no longer the North Star. And so you have to figure out and examine your life and figure out, okay, what are those areas that I've allowed to become my North Star? And then you have to take steps to be able to reconcile that and readjust your course. And so that's what the book is about. Exactly. And so that's what the book is all about. We look at people that if you were to look at them by today's standards, you would say they're not qualified to be used by God. They're not qualified to be leaders. And we examine some of those biblical stories of people that were used by God despite their past, despite the fact that they killed people, despite the fact that they were prostitutes, despite the fact that they've done all these things. They were still used by God because they said yes and they were willing. And so we look at some of those stories, and then we look at, I have a whole chapter of exercises and things that you can do to examine your life and identify those things that have become your North Star, and then begin to remove them slowly. And again, part of that does come back to community. That is a big theme of my book. It's a big thing of everything that I speak of, because community is so important.
Yeah. Well, now I'm just kind of curious, like your favorite Bible story that helped you personally.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, I have 2 of them. I'm going to give you the story of David. I love the story of David because that is a true life change. When you think about the story and the journey that he went on, he went from being this this shepherd boy in the middle of the field, guarding his sheep, taking care of his sheep, to the point where if we saw David walking down the road, we would probably cross the road and not look in his direction because we didn't want him to come over and say hi, because he probably stunk to high heavens. Just picture this, right?
Right.
So he went from this shepherd, stinky boy in the middle of the fields to a king. You talk about a transformation and how God used him. And before he even became king, he was used by God to kill a giant with a sling and 3 stones, and really a sling and 1 stone. He had 3, but he only needed 1 because of his faith that God would protect him and guide him and help him with it.
Exactly.
Despite the fact that he was in an army camp full of soldiers that were trained and had armor and all these things, and he's just a shepherd boy with a sling and a stone. And so David is probably one of my favorite stories about trusting in God, even when it doesn't make sense, because it made no sense to everybody else that David would have the faith that he did when he faced off against Goliath.
Right, or that God would use him at all. Small kid taking on this whole giant.
Yep.
Well, this whole podcast, it focuses on business, leading people. I'm kind of curious for you how you see about leadership, because we think about if you are a Christ-like man, you gotta be quiet, meek, humble. How do you balance that with being like a strong leader of Christ and helping people to become leaders and strong in this world?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're in church or if you're in your business place. What it boils down to is the type of person that you are and your character. Some of the best bosses that I've had have been believers, and that's because they did what they knew was right, even when it was hard. They hired me and they allowed me to do my job. And when decisions were made, they made decisions that were done so in a way that everybody kind of knew what was going on. They didn't try to lie to everybody and sweep things under the rug and do everything. They were just honest, right? Mm-hmm. They had integrity, and they were the type of person that when I was just having a bad day, I could go up to them and be like, you know what? I'm really sorry I screwed this up. I'm having a crap day, right? And they were approachable. All of the things that the fruits of the Spirit, the things that we're supposed to exhibit on a daily basis, they were displaying those fruits.
Right. Because if you lead constantly out of fear, that might work for the KPIs for the short quarter, but like long-term trust, people can't talk to you, they can't trust you. So I'm guessing that your method long-term, like 10 years from now, it works like your whole brand then.
Yeah, I have been in a leadership position in every single job that I have ever held. I don't know how, but I always end up managing or going from the employee to the manager or supervisor in some way, shape, or form. And the one constant that I have in every industry that I have worked in, and so I don't care what industry you work in right now, if you're listening, my biggest number one rule is that my door is always open. And when I say that, I mean it. The employee can come and talk to me about anything, literally. And if I'm working on something, I will stop what I'm working on if I'm able to and talk to them about what it is they need to talk about, because they're coming to me for a reason. Right. And if I can't do it for that reason, or in that moment for whatever reason, then I at least acknowledge that they're there, and I say, hey, let me circle back to you, and I set a time to do that, and I do it. If you can be a man of your word or a woman of your word, and you can be that leader that somebody approaches or feels comfortable approaching, then you're going to have the respect of your employees, the respect of your company. And when you have the respect of those people, they're going to give you 110%. Versus if they are terrified of you, and every time you walk into the room, they're looking over their shoulder because they don't know what you're there for.
Exactly. I'm curious though, how do you balance the whole, you love people, the grace, while also giving like the tough feedback so they can grow and change for like your company.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a natural thing, right? It's a natural part of any job. The key is how you do it.
Right.
You can bring somebody into your office and sit them down and just basically yell at them. You did this and you did that and you just suck. You're a terrible person, blah, 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 blah. We've all had those types of supervisors. You walk out feeling 2 inches tall.
Right.
Versus having somebody come in and be like, hey, you know what? I really appreciate all you're doing for the company. But this has been brought to my attention. And here's kind of what I'm seeing and here's what I'm hearing. And here's what I think needs to happen. But before we get to that, I would really love your side of things, your opinion. What's going on? Because it may be, yeah, they missed the report that week. But there might be an underlying reason there that they haven't told you about because they were afraid to. And so it's not going into a meeting just ready and set to chew somebody out. Allow them the chance to be able to kind of explain why they missed the appointment, the deadline, why it's, or and it goes back to the ability to be approachable. Hey boss, you know what? I'm probably going to miss the deadline today by 24 or this week by 24 hours because I have X, Y, or Z going on and I can't get around it. Well, if you're approachable, then you can be like, you know what, Bob? I really appreciate you letting me know. Let's loop in Susie and see if she can help so we can not meet this deadline because it's really important. Or you as a supervisor can go to your higher ups and be like, hey, here's what's going on. Give them the heads up and kind of smooth things out before crap hits the fan and then they're yelling at you because you didn't do something. It's all about communication and then how you approach things. Treat somebody like a human and show them grace. Show them the grace and the love that God has shown you in your faith and your journey. And it's going to go a whole lot better for you in the workplace.
Wow, that was perfect. Because basically you help to coach people, right? The last 15 years have helped to help people with their communication, leadership. I'm curious for you, your first step. You meet somebody, they're brand new, some new team. How do you first help them to change that team, structure, the whole culture of that company as a coach that you do?
Yeah, I don't coach companies specifically. And I don't do a whole lot on the business side. I obviously can. So if you're out there and you want to work with me, let me know. But anytime I go into any kind of a place, the first thing I do is exactly what I said earlier. I shut up.
Yes.
A lot of people, they go in and they're like, yeah, I'm here for a reason. And I'm they come in with this holier than thou, persona. And they come in and like, you know what? I'm the expert, blah, blah, blah. And here's what you need to change. And here's what you need to change. And some of those things probably don't need to be changed. And you know what? Some of those things might need to be changed, but not in the way that you think, because it's not going to work for the culture of that company. And so when you walk in, you need to shut up and listen and observe and just spend time getting to know the people in the company and the goals and the objectives of the company. And once you kind of get a feel for that and you get a feel for the culture and how people are feeling and all that stuff, then you can begin to give recommendations on what needs to change and how they can change it in order to have the best success. Because I see people out there, and I've seen this in many companies over the years as I've been working, they come in and they make changes to make changes, but there's no real reason behind them. It doesn't actually fix anything. They're making a change to make a change to make it look like they're fixing things, but really in a lot of cases they're making it worse. And the employees are confused. And when the employees are confused, they're spending more time worrying about their confusion and trying to find the answers to their confusions than they are working. And when they're doing that, your productivity goes down.
I love how just real you are.
And so when you take the time to make sure that you're making the decisions for the right reason, not because you think it's a good idea, because a good idea fairy strikes at every level. The good idea fairy should be locked in a closet and never opened the door again. Take the time, talk to the people that these rules are going to affect. Hey, Bob, hey, Susie, here's this rule that we're looking at implementing. I know that you're working on this program, or I know that you're doing this or that. Can you give us some feedback on how this might affect you? And then they can give you real-time feedback. But you know what? That's a really good idea. Or you know what? This is a good idea, but this and this and this and this might happen. You as a manager probably didn't think about that because you're not boots on the ground. The boots on the ground people are going to see things a lot differently than you do because they're doing it day in and day out.
Right,
so yes, exactly. So seek the advice of the people that are boots on the ground and doing the job day in and day out, and allow them some feedback as much as possible, because then they are going to be more on board and supportive of it and feel like they have a say. And when they feel like they have a say and they can understand the things that are happening, they're going to buy in. And when they buy in, they're going to do more for you and your productivity will go up.
That's so true, because if they don't want to buy in, it'll be out of fear. And most bosses, they don't ask for feedback. They more just tell you, hey, do X, Y, and Z for them. And there's no real back and forth there. But from my hearing from you, like, your whole philosophy is about values, trust, and being open. Whereas most company cultures, they are not that way at all. It's more about, I told you to do this. So
yeah, you look at simple things like, well, right now the hot topic is working from home, right? There's companies out there right now that are saying, yeah, everybody needs to work from home. Well, why? Why? What's it doing for you? Number one, it's increasing your costs as a company, because now you're paying electricity and water and sewer and desk space and all these other things to have these people come into the office and do work. And you know what? You're getting less from them, because every moment they're at work, they're not working the entire 8 hours that they're in the building. They're probably working maybe 4 hours of it, because the rest of the time is going back and forth between desks and talking about this, that, or the other thing, and, you know, socializing and doing everything else that humans do when they're around each other.
Right.
Or they can be at home, saving you money because now you're not paying for all these utilities and all these other things. And the chances are they're probably more productive. I mean, when the world shut down with COVID-19, we saw that. The workforce was more productive because they were at home and they weren't distracted.
Easy.
And so the workplace, these companies that are bringing people back into the buildings, I really feel like they're doing that because it's what we've always done. And because they want to have control of their workforce. Well, you know what? You don't have control of their workforce unless they're doing something that absolutely requires them to be there in person. You know, if you're a photographer or a videographer or something like that, you can't do that remotely. If you're a machine operator in a factory, you probably can't do that remotely. You know, there are some roles that you do have to be there. That's a given.
But most.
But if you're, if you work in communications, if you work in marketing, if you work in HR, a lot of those types of things can be done remotely, and you can still do the job the same way because you still have this amazing thing called the internet that allows you to stay connected, and people can get a hold of you through Slack or Teams or whatever it is, whatever program it is that your company decides to use.
Right. It takes trusting them though to be at their house and do the work, but they don't trust you, then there's no work done. So it takes that two-way process there.
And that goes back to exactly what I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. If you trust your workforce and you treat them like the humans and the adults that they are, then you're going to get more out of them because they feel the trust. But if you're saying, hey, I need you to come into the building every single day, and you don't really give them a reason why, what you're saying is, hey, I need you to come in the building every single day because I don't trust you.
Right. It's kind of close to how God sees us. He trusts us to do our thing, even though God could take over and do it great and perfect, but he trusts us to be here. Same for like our bosses and employees. You have to trust them to get the job done in that same way.
I mean, when I was during COVID, and there was a point where I was working from home, and you know what? I'll be honest. There was at one point during a workday where I wasn't at my desk. I had to run my kid to school, or I had to go do this, or I had to go do that. But I made up the time. And even the time that I wasn't there, I really wasn't missing much, because what would have taken me 3 hours to do in the office took me 40 minutes to do at home.
Right, less business and paperwork.
Because I didn't have 15 people stopping by my desk to shoot the breeze in that 3-hour time frame. So
exactly,
it's all about trust, and it's all about treating people like humans, and just allowing yourself to be seen and thinking in a way that is different than what the world says that we should do from a secular standpoint.
Right, because if you are leading people, you are by definition already different from them. You have to lead from a different standpoint in that way. Well, you have been fantastic. We've covered a lot of different topics here. I'm curious for like your last thought to the audience. What would you tell them? Like your last parting thought here.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, if you have questions and I've said something, connect with me. I would love to talk to you. You can go to the website, wesleyfarnsworth.com/start. That has a link to my books, my podcasts, everything that I'm doing. Plug your name and email in, and I'll email you the PDFs and the guides that I've developed for you, specifically as listeners for podcast. I'll send those over to you. But the number one advice that I leave everybody with, and I love this because it's really the foundation to everything that I do, is this. And if you get nothing else from what I've shared today and on this episode, I want you to hear this and remember it. You are not defined by the things that you have done, the things that have been done to you, or the things that other people say about you. You are defined only by who you say you are, and more importantly, who God says that you are. And that is that you are his child, and that he loves you, and that he is there for you.
Wow, that was amazing. Well, guys, go check him out. Go buy his book. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Until next time, stay hungry.